There's a reason why beginners with the memory palace technique fail, whether it's for memorizing names at business meetings or passing exams or learning languages. This reason can be avoided, and when you get this right, you can join the ranks of the successful, the people who learn to speak languages with greater ease, the people who rattle off all the names of the people they meet at business events, those who absolutely adore sitting for exams because stress has been thrown out the window. So pay attention to everything we're about to cover in this video, because these reasons, there's actually more than one if you don't mind me sharing, but there's one big reason in particular that we're going to get to. These reasons can be eliminated. They're so easy to eliminate if you would just follow the plot. So the first one is the idea of a one memory palace is the way to go strategy. People say, well, my memory palace. Really? No, that's never what the tradition has been. The point is to have multiple memory palaces. This point has never been so clear in my mind as right now. I edit a new version of Peter of Rowena's legendary book, The Phoenix. He apparently had over 100,000 memory palaces. And so a lot of people make this mistake that they're going to just work all day long on perfecting their one little rinky-dinky memory palace. That doesn't work. Now, there's a sub-problem here. In addition to not making as many memory palaces as possible as quickly as possible, people think, well, could I copy someone else's example? Or could I use a movie as a memory palace? Or could I use a video game as a memory palace? And yes, you can. There are no memory palace police to stop you. But you're sabotaging the very thing that's going to help you master memory palaces for studying in the first place. So what you want to do is learn how to properly design at least 26 memory palaces based on the ancient tradition, which didn't always use 26, but hey, we speak English together, you and I, and so that's what we're going to do. Whether we're learning Chinese, which has pinyin, or we're learning Russian or Ukrainian, which has many more letters than that, or we're learning Italian, which has fewer letters than 26, we're going to design a memory palace network that matches the thinking style of the alphabet that you use in your mother tongue. And then you're going to make one memory palace for every letter of the alphabet as your opening gambit. Because when you read my new version of Peter of Rowena's The Phoenix, which is called Phoenix Reborn, you're going to be inspired to also try to have 100,000 memory palaces. And if you really get into my work, which you should subscribe for if you aren't already, and hit that thumbs up for the love of memory so the robots never forget that we humans care about our own minds and the ancient memory tradition. What you're going to do is you're going to just absolutely love making multiple memory palaces and discover deeper in my work about the infinite memory palace technique, and I'll give you a resource for that later. Now, the overcrowding of your rooms is another problem. So let's just say that you have said, yes, Anthony, I agree. I need multiple memory palaces. Now, the other issue you may get into is that you try to squeeze too much stuff into every room in a memory palace. Well, the warning sign is already there. One reason why people stuff too much in any individual room in a memory palace is because they don't have enough memory palaces. They're trying to cram because they just haven't done their homework. Well, the homework is clear to you now. So to optimize the stations, well, you can learn from the ancients. Peter of Rowena is so good on this. He actually says a little mathematical calculation to optimize the space that you need between the different places, he calls them in his teaching. And so what does he mean by place? Well, you know, this bookshelf, if I were to use this area right here, that'd be one place. And then if I move on over to this part of the bookshelf, that would be the second place. He has some very, very nitty-gritty specificities about how much distance should be between those two spaces. I don't necessarily agree with them, but, you know, it's his book. The point is that if you're too cluttered, you're going to have problems. And you're going to have two kinds of problems. You're going to have the problem that you're trying to just squeeze too much information, which is going to make it stressful when you are sitting for your exam or trying to speak a foreign language. Or you're going to wind up basically just suffering from not being able to use it properly with flow. So we want to be in this situation where we're actually enjoying what we're doing, and we base it on our memory, and we just don't have to think about, well, do I split this up this way or that way? We essentially have a process that we follow. Now, that process is quite easy to establish, but how exactly you do it involves a very scary word, and that word is depends. How exactly you do it depends on how many memory palaces you have, how much experience you have using them. And that might scare some people off, but to me, that should be the call to adventure. I am going to have, like Peter of Rowena, 100,000 memory palaces. I'll get the experience I need, lickety-split, because I'm on the journey, ready to go. So your memory palaces never have to get too full, and that really could only ever happen if you didn't make your first memory palace network from A to Z, one for every letter of the alphabet. Believe me, there's more. You can have one for every number from 0 to 9. You can have one for every number from 00 to 99. And that might raise questions in your mind. Should I have both? Or why would I have 00 to 99 and 09? Well, these are all secrets that are unlocked in the Magnetic Memory Method Masterclass. And I would encourage you to get that if you want to really have multiple systems, because there's so many advantages to having multiple systems. And it's really not that much work. People don't like that word work. I love it because the techniques work when you put them to work, but you have to learn them and you have to practice them and develop them and then practice developing them and develop the practice of, you know what I'm saying. Anyway, what's another problem? What's another failure point? People have weak images that they place inside of memory palaces. So if you don't know what a memory palace is and you've never used one before, basically the idea is let's say I want to memorize something here. I used to have tests in university and we would have phrases like pregnans constructio, which could also be rendered constructio pregnans. And I would have to memorize something like that. And, you know, that I'm going to place an image here that helps me remember this. So, you know, at that time, there were certain people in the presidency in the United States that were called neocons, and I would have something like that for constructio, and they would be pregnant. And so, you know, that's a very compelling image, especially since politicians are annoying. And so we would I would just think there and go, oh, that's what that word was. And then if it was something like architectonic tautology over here, I would have an archer and a specific archer, and you know, just think about what that is, and then I'd be able to pass the test. Same thing with foreign language learning, etc. But the images were very, very strong because they were annoying images that I would sometimes use. I think of that guy again, right? Yes, exactly, because it pops, and I don't have to work hard because even though it's not that fun sometimes to think about these particular images, they're really striking. So one very simple thing to do is just work on making your images as obviously surprising, theatrical, active, and ridiculous as possible. And if you have a hard time remembering that, just think of star and then put that in a memory palace, and then that will maybe help you use this particular approach. There's many, many little acronyms that you can come up with, which is another thing. A mistake that people make is they don't make a little mental model. So I often elaborate my images using cave cogs, which is kinesthetic, auditory, visual, emotional, conceptual, olfactory, gustatory, and spatial, which means that if I have an annoying politician, a neocon here, to help me remember constructio pregnans or pregnans constructio, it is pregnant with meaning, then I'm going to think about like what are the feelings involved physically, kinesthetic. I'm going to hear things in my mind's ear and visualize a little bit. I don't see images in my mind so much, but, you know, just do what I can. Emotions for the E, and the rest, cave cogs. It's just a very, very powerful thing. You don't have to use that. But the point is that if you don't have something like that, it's very difficult to make striking images. So you never have to have boring information in your life ever again if you have these tools that make it possible to just have these memorable little scenes that you can feel physically here in your mind and have all these different tools. Big mistake, easily solved. The next problem is that people skip their review schedule. So if you're going to spend all your time working on placing images in memory palaces and then not do review using the memory palace, That's not good. You're going to have all kinds of problems. So you need to come up with some sort of non-negotiable review rule. And it might be 24 hours for you. This is the annoying thing about the teaching. I can't say, here's the cookie cutter, one size fits all answer for everybody. No, you have to personalize it. There's no perfect review timeline. Now, there are some general indications. Like if you are skilled in a topic, you can have fewer review periods because you have what's sometimes called context-dependent memory benefits or state-dependent benefits. So, if I'm studying a language, for example, and I've been studying it for a long time, I might be able to review on the first day, the 7th day, the 21st day, etc., and get great long-term recall out of that. But if it's a brand new language, I might want to do it the first hour, the second hour, the third hour, and then, every 5 hours for the rest of the first week or something like that, every day for 5 days. There's no magic numbers. You need to figure out what it is that you're memorizing, what your level of skill is, and how much context you already have, because it'll always be changing depending on the context. So how do you review without burning out? This is a major question. And one way to do it is to think about how that you can randomize your review. And this is another problem that people have, is that they don't randomize. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm talking about randomization of your review. There's a problem with randomization that we'll get to next. But in terms of randomizing review, even if you stick with a specific pattern, which you do want to do in order to be disciplined about reviewing every day at 7 a.m. or whatever, which is what I do when I'm memorizing things that I really need to get into memory, I make sure that I show up on a schedule. But I also randomize it. So I'll just go, it's 4 a.m. or 4 p.m. or whatever time it is, because I am often up at 4 a.m. I'm just going to randomly pop into my memory palace and start to review the material. So randomize it a little bit. Be both structured and get into things. The other thing about randomization is that if you're practicing memorizing a long form content text, like I often do with the Sanskrit pieces that I memorize or phrases in Latin. There's one I memorized the other day, nos hominis rusticos et idiotus, which would be like, we are idiotic people, we are rustic and idiotic people, something like this in English. And the translation actually was something more like we are hicks and hillbillies in the English translation. Hilarious. Anyway, I have to check that my Latin there is correct because I only memorized it recently. But the thing is, there's a much longer phrase, but sometimes I just don't have time to memorize or to practice recalling everything from a phrase. And I like to randomize things. And so what I'll do is just roll dice. And it says recall 5 words because that's what the dice shows. And I'll just do that. And then sometimes it's 2, sometimes it's 1. And you might think, well, what benefit are you going to get from 1? You're going to get the benefit of random, right? So randomize what you're doing, but also have structure. This can really, really help. And also the same thing, if you just want to practice memorizing words, don't always try to memorize 20 words. Try to memorize 20 words as a regular routine, but then sometimes roll dice and multiple dice, and it says 25, so that's what you got to work on. It says 7, that's what you got to work on. I feel like more like than 7. Well, fine, but just do 7 because that's what the dice said. And this will help you be much more nimble and on your feet in real life. Dexterous, that's probably the better word that I'm looking for. It's just being able to respond to randomness is really, really key. Here's where, however, I don't recommend randomness because this is a problem that makes people fail. They don't stick to strict memory palaces that they've created. They just start using routes at random that they haven't planned. They zigzag all over the place. So in my free course that I offer on the Magnetic Memory Method website, I talk about not crossing your own path. I talk about not leading yourself into a dead end. Creating a one-way flow that can actually flow forward and backward because it's very, very simple, brain dead easy, will help you do what the memory palace is for, to make information stick. But if you use your memory palace sometimes this way, sometimes that way, you don't have logical path design. And that logical path design is going to be illogical. It's going to be random. And that's going to cause an issue so that when later you're practicing recalling words like 5 words at random, and then sometimes 21 words at random, when you're testing yourself that way, you're going to have so much fidgety stuff with your random memory palace that you're not going to be able to use the technique. So put the random practice where it belongs, with amounts of recall, with amounts of memorization. But your memory palace roots, they should not be random. I mean, there may be a context in which you want to practice with random memory palaces, and I guess there is one time when I do that, sort of. So when I go and memorize names at events, it is totally new to me. I've rarely been in the same room twice where I do a presentation. So I have to sort of randomly create a memory palace based on the order of the people that I'm memorizing their names, and then I will randomly use it as a memory palace. So I guess maybe you could practice using random memory palaces in order to get good at that, but how would you do that? Oh, I know. Go and do demonstrations where you memorize people's names in rooms you've never been in before. So you just get that practice if that's what you do, but you don't have to go out of your way to do it, because normally when you want to be stress-free at exams, you just have built memory palaces for purpose that never change. So some simple tricks for making logical paths are to draw your memory palace. Oh, I've received so many thousands of memory palace drawings, and people thank me all the time. Why has no one ever in any other training ever talked about this? Maybe because they don't use memory techniques like I teach them for language learning, for actually passing exams in ways that are super easy. Not everybody has to draw memory palaces. I'm not saying that, but most of us, we're going to get a huge benefit out of it. And I've seen it year after year after year, that the people who will draw their memory palaces, they succeed so much better. I kid you not. When I say draw memory palace, I mean chicken scratch. It's not about art. It's not about draftsmanship. It's not about anything other than just making a simple plan, because you make it static. Now you can see it like from a bird's eye view, or whatever you want to call it, omniscience. And then you can imagine how that journey is going to be. And so then your scenes, or your little magnetic vignettes, these images where you're going to have pregnant neocons, and George Bush being pregnant is very memorable, isn't it? You're going to have, was he a neocon? I don't know politics. That's what I thought he was. So I used it to help memorize that. Your images don't have to be accurate, by the way. They just have to get you the accurate information back. But it's dynamic, and it can be dynamic because the memory palace itself is static. It's stuck. It's drawn. So the images will not fade inside of them because they feature the image, right? So it's like creating little mini theater plays. Now, some people will say, oh, but shouldn't I make movies? Well, I don't think so, because movies just play automatically and they play back the same way every single time. But if you think of yourself as like a theater director, every memory palace is the stage of a theater, and then you're the director, and you just say to the actors, give me the text, give me the content. And then you let them just operate differently, different times. As long as they actually perform the information, you're happy if they are a little bit different every time. So, relax a little bit, but make sure that your memory palaces are static so that the feature is the actor. The feature is the image, and it has the space to perform because it doesn't have to rebuild a new memory palace all the time. So it's very, very important. And this lets you build and develop and experience more emotional connections, which is very, very powerful. And a lot of people say, well, I'm worried I'll waste a memory palace, or I might get hung up on remembering emotions that I had in the memory palace. That can happen, but try to just treat it like a tool. Literally just turn it into a schemata, and don't think about it emotionally. Allow it to be a blank, neutral space in which emotional things happen. You'll succeed so much faster, and you'll remove so many obstacles this way. It's very powerful. Now, another problem that people have is they reuse memory palaces. Now, there's nothing wrong with reusing memory palaces as such, but they'll try to do it too soon. They won't, for example, use 26 memory palaces first with maybe 10 words in each, so you have experience with 260 words worth of content. No, they won't do that. They'll just maybe make one memory palace and then start reusing it over and over and over again. And you know what? Maybe that works for some people. But the reality is that it just becomes a very difficult thing for people that could succeed so much faster if they would just spend a little bit more time on being predictable with the skill itself, so they can rely on it. Now, How long do you wait before you start reusing memory palaces? If you want a fixed rule, my recommendation would be, please never try to reuse a memory palace until you have 26 memory palaces and you've memorized at least 10 pieces of information in each of them. That's 260 pieces of information. Sounds like a lot? Well, this is the magnetic memory method world. We think that that's actually a tiny, teeny little bit. Look up in the stars. That's a lot of stars. That's a tremendous amount of stars. Galileo, he said that the alphabet was the most amazing human invention because this small set of symbols produces an infinity of expressions or possible expressions. So we're talking about 26 in order to have it all, to have infinity, right? So please just get it done and really understand that it is so simple to express or at least touch the possibility of infinity because of the limits, but you want to make sure that you have those limits. And 260 words, 10 in each memory palace, is nothing. Oh, but it is the path to everything or something like it. If I haven't convinced you yet, here's another argument for why I think the alphabetical arrangement is so powerful. Not that I have to put too much force on it. Aristotle talked about it thousands of years ago, and if Aristotle doesn't know what's going on, I don't know who does. The thing is you're going to be able to categorize and catalog information so much easier. Arrange memory palaces by subject. Arrange memory palaces by author. Arrange memory palaces by verbs. Arrange them by adjectives. Whatever it is that you want to do, you'll have so many options because you're prepared alphabetically. So, it's just really, really powerful. If you need help with all of this, make sure to get involved with the magnetic memory method. You can start with the free course on my website. We have monthly meetings. Sometimes you'll get invited to these if it's appropriate for you. People getting together. They're serious about being able to have like a library index system in their minds. And they are fun to be around because they have understood what I'm saying and they've at least done some of the work to create the alphabetical memory palace system. And it's just I've been doing it since 2015. And wow, like all those recordings are available for you if you want to go back through the history. And we talk about how to motivate yourself. We talk about how to organize your life. And, I've done pretty good over the last 15 years myself being consistent with not only my memory practice, but all the things that I do in order to make videos like this for you. So if you could get a little bit of that magnetic karma rubbing off on you and it would help you move forward, make sure you're involved. And so link for that is down below in the description. And I've got one more suggestion for you, but the next video to watch, if you want more about this, is about how to make multiple memory palaces, some ways that you can connect them together if that's what you'd like to do, and some more caveats that will help you remove more weaknesses, avoid more failure, because you are better equipped to just use the knowledge that you have to avoid mistakes. So that's coming up next. But here's my last tip for you today. With thanks to everybody who has my books, who's part of the Magnetic Memory Method Masterclass, who is regularly commenting on these videos so the robots don't forget that humans care about this ancient memory tradition. I want you to avoid the mistakes that I had to go through. They're painful. They waste time. But don't go in fear of making mistakes. They're your best teacher. And there's actually no way to avoid them. No matter how much time you spend on education, you're still going to wind up making mistakes because we're all human. And not only that, we don't know what we don't know. So we may have understood something conceptually, but there may be a practical aspect that comes up in your practice that you couldn't possibly have ever expected. I mean, I can tell a lot of stories, and one of my favorite is my TEDx Talk. When I did the dress rehearsal before the actual event, people laughed at the joke where I placed the joke in the speech. In the actual TEDx Talk, they didn't laugh at that spot, and then later they laughed at a place that I didn't intend to be funny at all. And I had to run with that, because it bounced me out of what I was talking about. And I thank goodness I had a memory palace because I could find my way back to where I was supposed to be. But, it's because I'm so practiced and accepting of mistakes. It's that technically there was some kind of mistake. When people don't laugh, where you actually intended them to laugh and they laugh some other place, technically that's a mistake, and I own it. But because I'm so used to making mistakes and I don't try to avoid mistakes, or at least I try to get myself to avoid making mistakes. It's a discipline unto itself. I'm able to learn, and I'm able to accept that mistakes are actually gifts. They are the ultimate lesson. So I hope this helps you out. Check out how to build multiple memory palaces next. And until we have a chance to speak again, by educating yourself and embracing mistakes, you will be able to keep yourself magnetic.